Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. Hello again and welcome to this week's edition of the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen. We are less than a week away from WrestleMania, both April 1st and 2nd. A very exciting time to be a wrestling fan, and a very special episode if you are a wrestling fan. Outside of the predictions episode that'll be dropping later this week, I decided to wrangle two of my closer wrestling fan friends, Josh Cross and Donnie, to enter the Juice Box and have a sort of debate moderated by yours truly, and discuss a lot of different topics, a plethora, if you will, including their top 5 pay-per-views of all time, their top 5 favorite wrestlers of all time, a Mount Rushmore, and a little bit of a background in case that they would like to come back on again. And after this discussion, it is for sure going to be likely that both of these guys get back on the program. We had a hell of a time discussing all these different topics, and then we went into the debate portion where we went over 3 different debate topics, including who is going to win at WrestleMania, Roman or Cody. Is CM Punk ever going to come back to wrestling in any capacity whatsoever? And do you prefer a one-night WrestleMania or the 2-night format that they've been going with since WrestleMania 36? All these topics were covered, and we all had a great time. We discussed everything in pretty solid detail. We had a little bit of a technical snafu late in the show, but we recovered, and we got back up on our feet and completed the whole thing. It was a fun time. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it. As usual, hopefully you can go to twitter.com @JuicySteen. Follow me there. My wrestling t-shirt Instagram @JuicyWrestlingCloset. And as always, go to iTunes, rate this 5 stars, rate a review if you can. And juicysteen.podbean.com is another way to get to this show. Please subscribe if you have not already. And this is the pre-Mania Mania, where we get some debated issues, highly contested by both Donnie and Josh Cross. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. So without further ado, here comes the Triple Threat Theater, the wrestling fans debate before WrestleMania. All right, here we are in the Juice Box. This is the arena portion of the Juice Box, where we have 2 of my wrestling fan friend, whatever you want to call, debating certain topics that I've laid out for them, knowing that they will probably go at each other's throats about these topics. It's going to be exciting for me to hear it, and I'm sure it'll be exciting for everybody to listen to 2 adult grown men arguing about pro wrestling. So, first I'd like to introduce these guys. First we got Josh Cross. I've known him since college, and he's been one of my closer wrestling friends that I've had the privilege of knowing. And in regards to that, he kind of led me into Donnie, who is a friend of his, and now he's a friend of mine. He always likes talking wrestling. Both these guys love talking wrestling. Different backgrounds, and we're going to kind of go into that to start this whole thing. And then we're going to go into some top 5 talk, some Mount Rushmore talk, and then we'll close out with some debate topics as we are closing in on WrestleMania this coming Saturday and Sunday. So first, we'll just start with you, Josh Cross. What got you into wrestling? What was it? And, summate that for me.
All right, Dan, I just want to thank you very much for having me on your show, or should I say Juice instead. It's an honor and a privilege, and I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I first got into wrestling through my grandfather. He was born and raised in the Pittsburgh region, as I was. Back in the 60s and early 70s, there was a program in the Pittsburgh region called Studio Wrestling on Channel 11, hosted by Bill Cardille. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, at least. It was the go-to place for wrestling in the Pittsburgh region before the then WWF took over, I believe, in the early 70s. Um, I remember my grandfather, he had like one or two tapes of studio wrestling whenever they filmed it down at the then Civic Arena in downtown Pittsburgh. I remember him having a tape of a match between Bruno Sammartino and I think it was Jumpin' Johnny DeFazio. I'm not really sure, but I know there's a huge amount of notable names that was in studio wrestling at the time. Like I said, DeFazio, Sammartino, Johnny Valiant, Dom DiNucci, Larry Zbyszko. It was the go-to place for professional wrestling in Pittsburgh in the 60s and early 70s. And that's where he became a fan. He used to go to shows all the time down there back when he was younger, and he just passed it down along the generation to me. My grandfather, he was a big WWF guy during the Monday Night Wars. He never really watched WCW. I never really got into WCW really either. The first time I watched it with him, it was like the lead up to, I think it was WrestleMania 14 in 1998, I believe it was. And just watching Raw, and I used to watch Raw with him every single Monday. It was like our ritual to do, and I did it all throughout grade school, middle school, and high school with him. And then in college, I kind of stopped because I had to move away for college, so I couldn't watch it with him every Monday anymore. But I still tried to continue doing that until he passed away. So that's my wrestling background history.
Your little wrestling origin story, if you will. That's fascinating stuff, and Pittsburgh really has a rich history with pro wrestling. Like you said, Bruno Sammartino, Larry Zbyszko, which in fact had such a huge rivalry in late 70s, early 80s, which some people talk about those matches to this day as some of the most brutal matches that they had. I believe there was a cage match that was famous between the two, but the fact that Pittsburgh is a part of all that is rather spectacular, and I think it's incredible that your grandpa got to see some of these guys in their prime. So it's great to have you here. Although it's unfortunate that you guys were not a WCW family, but I'll allow it this time. All right, Donnie. Well, how did you get into the world of pro wrestling where grown men wrestle in their underwear?
Well, first off, I would just like to say thank you to Dan for having us on. I appreciate it. Been looking forward to this for a while now. My story is pretty much kind of similar to Josh's in a way. So my grandfather got my dad into professional wrestling a very long time ago when he was a kid. Bruno Sammartino, Larry Zbyszko, Bob Backlund, like those kind of guys are what my dad got started on. He was a huge Bruno Sammartino fan, and then kind of went into, I guess, like, these guys weren't on TV back in the day, so you really couldn't watch what we're, like, able to watch now. So he would have to read magazines about Ric Flair, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, like those kind of guys. They weren't around here. He said, like, his first big memory of wrestling was, like, when, I guess they went down to the arena for WrestleMania 3, back when they had it, like, on the Jumbotrons, and you can go down and, like, watch it on the TVs and stuff like that. But he said it didn't work when they went down there, so everybody got a refund. I could just imagine going through that. Other than that, he used to tell me, like, stories about him going down. I guess he was married before he met my mom, and him and his wife would go down to shows. And after he met my mom and, found out that they were going to have me, he's like, okay, well, what can I do with my son that's going to be relatable? What can I do that I enjoy? So that's where the wrestling thing came in. We were a WCW family, unlike Josh Cross. We did watch WCW. We watched ECW. We watched WWE. I was, a big WWE fan. So anytime my dad would turn the channel to WCW, I'd kind of be like, these are older guys. I kind of want to see The Rock and Stone Cold. I don't want to see Hulk Hogan. I'm past the Hulk Hogan point, but still enjoyed it all nonetheless. I didn't think we'd be here 30 years later still talking about this. My dad tells me all the time, he's like, I cannot believe that we've gotten to this point with your professional wrestling fandom, but it was one of the best things that I ever did. Made sure I had all the action figures, toys, pay-per-views. Like, I had it all, man, as a kid growing up. So, I mean, it could have been worse. I could have been brought into something else, but I really enjoy professional wrestling. I'm glad to be here talking with you guys about it. And, yeah, that's pretty much the story.
And that's another great lineage story. And I mean, I have a similar one with my dad getting me into wrestling. And it's just awesome that after all these years, we're still here, late 20s, early 30s, and we're still just discussing this stuff as if we're, you know, just getting involved. But that tells you one thing. It tells you that when wrestling is good, it's great. And we are at a great point, I believe, in pro wrestling with the advent of AEW 4 years ago. And now we have a plethora, if you will, of solid wrestling across the board in North America and abroad. I'm going to go through a couple of little topics with you guys just to get more of a background on you before we get into the debate of it all. We'll start with Donnie here. How many shows have you been to live in your history? It doesn't have to be an exact number if you don't have that. I know Josh did extensive research on his career, but I'd like to just know how many shows you've been to, any notable shows, and we'll go from there.
Are we counting indie shows too, or are you just talking about like the bigger professional wrestling events?
Let's stick to major shows now, but if there's anything notable on the independent scene, feel free to drop them in.
Okay. I want to say roughly it's probably been like maybe 20 shows. I think 3 pay-per-views in between those. The very first show that I went to, I remember being, I would think I was around like 7 or 8 years old, and it was at Ross Draver Ice Gardens. It was an ECW event. I don't remember if it was like a pay-per-view or a televised event, but the Dudley Boys were there. Tommy Dreamer was there. Just incredible. Like, it was the greatest thing I've ever been to. I feel like that being my first wrestling event means a lot just because, like, a lot of people didn't get to experience ECW when they were a kid, I feel like. So that was a cool thing. My first WWE event was No Way Out 2005, I believe, with the steel cage match with JBL and the Big Show. And then you had Kurt Angle and John Cena, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero against the Bashams. Batista came out at the end. I was really hyped for that because I was a super Batista fan at the time. That was like the whole reason why I wanted to go to the show. Been to a lot of Raws, a lot of SmackDowns. The only other pay-per-view I can think of off the top of my head was the Royal Rumble pay-per-view back when Batista won it. Ironically, Batista's a theme here, I guess. But everybody wanted Daniel Bryan to win. I'm pretty sure we know that already. Last thing, and I know indie shows don't count, but I want to give a big shout out to IWC Wrestling. If you're in the Pittsburgh area and you want to check out an indie show, they are bar none the top. Put on a great show every time. Fantastic product. If you guys want to check it out, feel free. It's in Elizabeth. They have a show once a month. It's usually on Saturday, so it's worth the price of admission.
That's fantastic, Donnie. I would agree with you. IWC is, I would say, the premier independent wrestling promotion in this area. Good friend of the show, Justin LaBar. You know, without Josh Cross, Josh Cross got me into Chairshot Reality, back in, I'd say 2013, 2014. I became a member of that show, and now we're here. He's on my show. It's a funny thing how that goes, but LaBar is a part of IWC, and IWC, I think, has pushed through so many great pieces of talent throughout the years. I mean, CM Punk was there, AJ Styles wrestled there, a number of guys in the early 2000s wrestled there, but of course, more recently, we have Wardlow, Britt Baker, DMD, just a lot of great talent coming out of this area. Josh mentioned a whole bunch of guys throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s that were huge in Pittsburgh, and now we've got a new, fresh crop of talent that's still evolving and going into AEW and WWE from these independent promotions. Donnie, you said No Way Out 05, that barbed wire steel cage match, I think is one of the most interesting and unique ways to finish a cage match, with JBL being chokeslammed through the ring, and he crawled from under the ring out to escape the cage. I was not watching wrestling at that point, like as I used to. I was done when WCW closed in 01 to 05. I didn't watch anything. And when I knew there was a pay-per-view in Pittsburgh, I was like, oh, that's interesting, you know, barbed wire, steel cage, what the hell is going on? And after that, I was kind of more invested, watched WrestleMania 21, and here we are, never looked back. So that is a great show that I wish I could have been to. But you also were at Royal Rumble 2014. We all wish it would have ended differently, but I think it's better looking at it now, seeing where things ended up at WrestleMania 30 with Daniel Bryan winning it all. Josh Cross, we've been to WrestleMania before. We've been to, you know, up and down the road. I feel like we're wrestling fan wrestlers. You know, we've gone all over the place. We might not have been to as many places as our friend Chris Lemke, who's been to every single professional wrestling event since 2020. But I know you've seen some great stuff. So how about you run down some of your favorite shows that you've been to over the years?
So my favorite show probably has to be WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. I loved Lesnar. Well, not really loved, but it was a fun main event in my opinion. I was glad Lesnar beat Reigns at the time. I also remember the tag team match between Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. Wait, was it? It was Daniel Bryan,
yeah.
Shane McMahon versus Sami Zayn.
KO and Sami. Yeah.
Too many times they have tagged together. I can't get them straight of who they face. And I also remember Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles as well. That was also a fantastic match. And I remember Seth Rollins coming out in the Night King get up at the time as well, because Game of Thrones was hot, but it's not really that big right now. I've also been to 3 other WrestleManias, WrestleMania 33, 30, obviously 34, 35, and 37 in Tampa. I've been to 1 SummerSlam and a Royal Rumble. And I've probably been to around 24 shows over the past 25 years or so. I think my first one was in 2005. It was the leading up to SummerSlam 2005 against HBK and Hogan. That's, I think, one of my first ones. I just remember Hulk Hogan being there, and I was really excited to see him at the time. I've also been to numerous indie shows. I've been to probably only 2 or 3 IWC shows, but the indie promotion where I went to a lot in college was the Renegade Wrestling Alliance, also known as RWA, in West Newton, Pennsylvania. They had probably one of the best indie feuds I've ever seen, with Ryan Mitchell and Ryan Edmonds in the circle, and they basically feuded with the whole roster and also the fans of RWA in West Newton. That was probably the best part of it, because they all took it seriously. Whether they know that it's scripted or real, I have no clue, but whatever they did, it made it way more enjoyable at the time.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up RWA, a little indie gem if you are, and I did not mean gym, I meant gem, but they do run out of a gym. If you do get a chance, if you're in the local area, the Pittsburgh area, I wouldn't say it's the top of the top. We mentioned IWC, but I think if you want a homegrown, grassroots, independent promotion where the fans genuinely care so much about the product. You know, some people could be critical of that because it's like, hey, we know it's scripted and blah, blah, blah. But I think a lot of companies would be chomping at the bit to get every single one of their fans to be as invested as the RWA fans are with RWA. So be that as it may, I love going to their shows. As a matter of fact, Rev Ron Hunt will be in a steel cage match on the 15th of April, and I do believe I might be in attendance for that event. Former Chairshot Reality co-host Rev Ron Hunt. But yeah, that a lot of great memories there. Mania 34 was fantastic. New Orleans was probably my, I don't know. I had a great time on Bourbon Street, but I want to say that Mania 33 in Orlando might have been my favorite time all time. I mean, Josh, that was your first WrestleMania, and I had I loved having you going there with me. You know, for the years we had talked about going, and I'd gone to 32, and then when the opportunity came for you to go to 33, it was unbelievable. We had a great place to stay with a whole bunch of different wrestling fans. We went to like every single show that week. It was just unreal stuff. So WrestleMania is always a good time. Let's transition though. Let's get out of the, we're going to go from some history to even more history here. We're going to go a little quicker with these next two. We're going to do some top fives before we get into the Mount Rushmore, which will be a slightly longer discussion potentially. But let's go with Josh Cross. I pose to you, let's hear your top 5 favorite wrestlers. Now, the caveat here, there really is no right or wrong answer. It's what you believe, in your heart of hearts, your favorite wrestlers to watch, to see what they do in and out of the ring. Maybe not necessarily the best or worst, but just your top 5 personal favorite wrestlers. Josh Cross, let's hear him.
I'm glad you added that caveat about this is not who I think is the best, but just my personal favorite where I just want to sit down and I know I'm going to enjoy almost every match that they're in or participate in. So, number 5. But before I get to number 5, I just want to give 2 honorable mentions. One is to MJF, and the other one is to the bastard Pac, aka the man that Krabby forgot, Adrian Neville, mostly because I probably own the only Neville shirt there is in the Western Hemisphere. So number 5. Now, Donnie's not going to appreciate this, but go with Adam Cole, baby. I actually met him before at Wing Shack before WrestleMania 33 in Orlando. You would think he's just any other regular Joe out there in the world. He was so nice. He was so accommodating. You could come up to him and talk to him. He would talk to you for like an hour or so. It did not matter what it was. It did not matter what the situation was. He was just very outgoing, and I honestly enjoy almost every promo he cuts. Most of his matches, they're always entertaining, especially when he was in the Undisputed Era during NXT. I actually saw one of his I think 2 of his matches actually at NXT in New Orleans and NXT in New York before WrestleMania 34 and 35, respectively. I think he was in that latter match at TakeOver before 34 in New Orleans, which was a 5-star match. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, it was a 5-star match.
Yeah, so I had the privilege to see. We saw 2 5-star matches that night, correct? I'm not mistaken, with Gargano and Ciampa, correct?
Yes, I do believe that was a 5-star match as well. I do believe you're correct.
Yeah. So number 4 for me probably gonna have to be The Undertaker. Undertaker's hands down the greatest gimmick in wrestling history, and I love that he kept kayfabe with it as long as possible. You never really saw him out doing meet and greets with fans. You never really saw him at the Hall of Fame ceremony. I remember talking to Donnie about this a few minutes ago, how he never really showed up to Hall of Fame ceremony until they inducted Paul Bearer after his death, and he did the little urn thing. He came out for I think like 2 minutes or something, and that was like his tribute to Paul Bearer. I loved supernatural aspects in wrestling, and he obviously had the best supernatural act that I know of. And I think there's numerous wrestlers out there today who try to have a supernatural act, but it really doesn't measure up to what Undertaker has done in the past. I also loved how he was the face of SmackDown for a good decade, from like 2002 until 2011, probably through the whole brand split. You could probably count on a Undertaker match almost every week on SmackDown for probably a good decade. Number 3 for me would probably be Kurt Angle. He's from Pittsburgh. He's a hometown hero. He went to high school probably about 20 minutes away from where I grew up. I also loved how he brought a sense of realism to wrestling, since he is the WWE's only Olympic gold medal winner in amateur wrestling. He could probably beat up most of the locker room, which I appreciate. And he's probably the most athletically talented wrestler to ever set foot in a WWE ring. Number 2 for me would be Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's obviously the face of the Attitude Era. He's probably the reason why I got into wrestling. Probably the second best on the mic beside The Rock. I obviously loved the Austin McMahon feud. I feel like that set the tone for the whole Attitude Era. And that feud probably will never be replicated in wrestling history, no matter who the authority figure or the anti-authority figure is. And my number 1, obviously, as you two know, is going to be CM Punk. He's probably the only person who took who he was in real life and just made it, you want to call it a gimmick at that point. It was just him going out every week and just being himself. It felt genuine. It didn't feel like an act. He really, in a sense, had some type of anti-authoritarian posture in him. And you couldn't really tell if what he was saying majority of the time was either shoot or kayfabe. And I also appreciate the fact that he had the first 5-star match in 14 years since HBK and Undertaker in WWE. And that's my top 5.
That's a hell of a top 5. I love how you somehow snuck in 2 more for a top 7, even though you consider them honorable mentions. But I will let it slide. It is the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen. It is my show, my rules. Hell of a Mount Rushmore, as I think we're going to have coming up. I think some of those guys in your top 5 are going to maybe end up there, at least one of them. And one of those guys I know we're going to be talking about later in the debate. So, Donnie, though, we'll go to you. Who are your top 5 favorite wrestlers of all time?
All right. Well, Josh had a top 7, so I kind of I'm going to trump him a little bit. I actually have a top 10 because I feel like this is a very loaded question. I feel like it's very hard to narrow it down to 5 guys while trying to give love to guys that are still on TV these days, like doing everything that they're doing and making the product as good as it is now for us to watch. So before I get into that, I want to agree with Josh about The Undertaker. You know, he's not in my top 5, but definite honorable mention. I agree with everything he said. For 30 years, 40 years almost, that guy didn't take an interview, barely spoke to anybody out in public, lived the gimmick. And that is probably the most impressive thing as far as what you can do in professional wrestling as there is. So 110% respect to The Undertaker. It will never be done again. Hats off to him. Oh, you had to bring up Adam Cole, though. You had to bring up Adam Cole. So before I get into this, I just have to say this. Adam Cole looks like he belongs working behind a register at 7-Eleven. He's going to come out and pump your gas. He's been gone for a year and doesn't look like he's touched one weight since he's been gone. And then when he does come back, all he does is cut the same promo that he was cutting in NXT on Karrion Kross 2 years ago. He just retorts the same thing over and over again. No new material. The guy doesn't recreate himself at all. He has the dumbest setup to a finish I've ever seen anybody have. And I don't see the appeal. So that's just my take on Adam Cole. Feel free to disagree or agree, whatever you want to do. But we'll get into it now. I'll go into the top 5 guys I think just on TV right now or on next level that really deserve some kind of shout out. I won't get too in depth, but number 5 for me is LA Knight. I feel like he's really coming along, really, finding his character after being handed that terrible Max Dupree gimmick. Took the best with it, ran with it, and came back strong as LA Knight. And I feel like after WrestleMania, maybe Money in the Bank, they'll find something for him to do. I hope so anyway. He really deserves it. Number 4 is Bray Wyatt. I don't really know, what the direction is they're trying to go with this guy right now. I don't know. There's been reports he's hurt. There's been reports that Vince is back, and he doesn't really, see eye to eye with him, and I understand that. But as far as creativity and everything, I feel like he might be the closest thing to The Undertaker we're ever going to get. So I hope that they kind of right that ship and figure out what's going on with him. Number 3 for me is Karrion Kross. I've followed him since FCW when he was having matches with Brian Cage. His Impact run was probably one of the best the company's ever had. Went to NXT, got hurt, came back, became champion again, had a really good run down there, and then they handed him that awful gimmick when he came up to the main roster. I don't know what the thought process was behind that, but I'm glad to see he's back. Another guy I'm hoping they find something to do with after WrestleMania because I feel like he's better than the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. But hey, everybody can't get on the card. Number 2 for me in that aspect is going to be Kenny Omega. I feel like Kenny Omega is probably the best in-ring performer in wrestling right now. The guy can't be touched as far as what he can do in the ring. He put 5-star matches on all across the globe. He's the best wrestler in the world. And then number 1, it has to be Roman Reigns. I don't need to say anything really. I feel like we all know. I'm going to get into him a little bit more later on anyway. So I'll just leave that at that right now. But my top 5 all time, number 5 is going to be CM Punk for pretty much all the reasons Josh said. His trilogy with Samoa Joe and Ring of Honor is probably one of the best 3 wrestling matches I've ever seen. Coming into WWE, they kind of really didn't find a spot for him at first, but then he went into the straight edge society stuff. That was super underrated to me. I feel like some of the promos and just the things that they did with that were before their time. And then obviously, he cuts the pipe bomb and we go into the matches with Cena and he has Summer of Punk and he does all that. It's unfortunate to see where we're at with him right now, and I'm sure we're going to touch on that later, but number 5 for me is definitely CM Punk. He's one of the best on the mic and best in the ring of all time. Number 4 will be, I feel like he's super underrated too. Number 4 for me is going to be Rob Van Dam. I started watching Rob Van Dam when I was watching ECW as a kid, and you could tell off the bat he was the best talent that they had as far as in-ring goes, and his charisma was just unmatched by anybody on the roster. His WWE run got off to a slow start, but one night stand, you had that gigantic match with John Cena at the second pay-per-view, and he wins the title. It was great to see somebody from ECW come up and actually be able to become the heavyweight champion of the world in a different company and kind of get, the recognition they deserve, and I don't feel like anybody's better at it than him. Number 3 for me is going to be the Macho Man Randy Savage. He's a little bit before my time, so I had to go back as I got older and watch some of his matches, but his match with Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 stands the test of time. You could put it up against anything that's coming out now. It's one of the best matches you could ever see. There was a match with him at Halloween Havoc with Diamond Dallas Page I'll touch on later. It was a really cool gimmick match. They had a little nice exchange up on the rampway with some props that you really don't see from time to time. And the last match that I really remember with Savage that I enjoyed was him and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. The Mega Powers collided. I feel like that storyline was just so organically done and so I don't want to say unique because you've seen faces versus faces before, but that's really like the first time other than Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan that you've seen something like that. So I feel like they did that really well. Number 2 all time for me is going to be Eddie Guerrero. I can sit here and say that I've never seen a bad Eddie Guerrero match in my life. I feel like Eddie Guerrero is one of the top 5 greatest in-ring performers of all time. Arguably could be number 1. It was great to see Eddie, finally get the WWE title when he won it off Brock Lesnar, No Way Out. It's a shame that we lost when we did. I feel like it was way too early. I feel like there was so much more left in Eddie's tank, and I feel like he would have so much more to contribute to the business now, especially with AEW being what it is and WWE in the place that they're at. He could be a coach in NXT. He could be a coach in AEW. I feel like there was just so much more for Eddie Guerrero to give the business, and he got taken away from us way too soon. And then number 1 for me is going to be The Rock. The Rock is pretty much the reason that I got into professional wrestling or fell in love with it. Like, I remember the first time I saw this guy, and he just captivates you every time he speaks. No matter what The Rock has to say on the microphone, you're going to listen because he is the greatest promo performer of all time. In-ring performer, some of his matches were, not so great, but I feel like you could always put The Rock in with somebody and you know what you're going to get. Great to see him come back and wrestle John Cena, even though he didn't have to do all that. That program for me is one of my favorites of all time, along with the programs he's had with Stone Cold Steve Austin. To me, that's the greatest rivalry in professional wrestling. I don't feel like anybody will ever top that. Nobody's going to main event 3 WrestleManias unless, of course, they're Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns because Vince McMahon says so. But I would have loved to see The Rock come back this year at Mania and wrestle Roman Reigns. Unfortunately, that couldn't be the case. I guess scheduling conflicts just are what they are. Hoping we do get to see that match in the future, though, because I feel like there's so much of a story to tell between those 2 guys. But yeah, that's my top 5 or top 10, I guess. I'm sorry if that dragged on a little bit too long, but I feel like you got to give the current guys some recognition too. You know what I mean?
Hey, you gotta, I gave you the floor and you gave us 10. So I appreciate all those little, detailed descriptions of all your top guys. I agree, on a lot of those guys. I think they're all well deserved. It is too bad that The Rock, he's such a great promo, but he couldn't even cut a promo to be at WrestleMania. It is very unfortunate. This is, of all times, the most perfect setup for The Rock to come in for a storyline. It literally is his bloodline. He actually, in all actuality, is the head of the table, yet he will not be there. Therefore, it is a little bit less than. But be that as it may, thank you guys for the top 5 favorite wrestlers. We're going to do, hopefully, these next ones a little bit quicker, probably because they're just events that we've enjoyed, watched over the years. So I'd like to do Donnie first here. Top 5 pay-per-views ever. Let's hear them.
Top 5 pay-per-views ever. Okay, I'll try not to get too in details with these ones, but for me, it's just a list compiled of like the pay-per-views I've enjoyed watching the most or like have the most rewatch value to me. Number 5 would be ECW One Night Stand. I feel like that crowd was unmatched that night. It's one of the best crowds in professional wrestling history. It was good to see, a lot of the guys that I watched in my childhood be able to be given a big stage and just have one night to kind of come back and do their thing. It's one of my favorite nights in wrestling. The Sandman entrance, if you could find it on YouTube, because they dubbed the theme song out on the network, but it's one of the greatest entrances you'll ever see. Number 4 for me is going to be Royal Rumble 2000. And I picked Royal Rumble 2000 because the two things that stand out to me the most are the street fight with Cactus Jack and Triple H. One of the best street fights I've ever seen. The story was so good going into that match, the way Mick Foley brought back Cactus Jack. And it was just a brutal slugfest, man. Like, they just left it all out there. And obviously The Rock winning the Royal Rumble. I don't necessarily agree with the way that they handled the main event of WrestleMania after he did that, but it was nice to see him go ahead and get one. Number 3 for me is going to be Halloween Havoc 1997. I already talked about the Macho Man Randy Savage and Diamond Dallas Page match. That street fight was just so unique to me and so enjoyable. Early match on the card was Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. It is a 5-star match across the board. If you haven't seen it, I recommend going to check it out. It's in their early years, but they tore the house down. Number 2 for me is a lot of people's number ones, and I understand why, but I'll get to that in a second. Number 2 for me is going to be WrestleMania 17. I feel like it's just top to bottom one of the best wrestling cards put together. Obviously, you have The Rock and Stone Cold in the main event for the second time. You have the Austin Hill turn at the end, which is kind of controversial, but I understand why they did what they did with that. And number 1 is going to be SummerSlam 2002. SummerSlam 2002 starts off with Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio, and they have an absolute barn burner for the opening match. And then you have, let me think here, I'm losing my place.
It's such a great pay-per-view that you forgot what happened on it. I know the main event is Brock and Rock.
Yes, the main event is Brock and Rock, but you also have Rob Van Dam and Chris Benoit in an Intercontinental title match, which is a very good title match. You have Edge and Eddie Guerrero in a singles match. I don't feel like they got enough time. I think they only got like 12 minutes or so, but still, for what they were given, I mean, it is Edge and Eddie Guerrero. You know what you're going to get. You had the street fight with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and you told the whole story about how Shawn's coming back. And man, for being gone as long as he was, for him to come back and have a match like that physical, and to put on that kind of a show, that's so impressive to me. The man had no ring rust at all. And then obviously the last match, you have the big showdown with Brock and Rock. And I'll never forget like those promo videos that they had leading up to that with Brock carrying logs, like running down the street, running miles. Then you had The Rock running in the stadium. Like, those video packages to me were so ahead of their time. And then for The Rock to do the honors and kind of, pass the torch to Brock and say, okay, it's your show now. That just goes to show you The Rock's always been for the business. And it led into Brock carrying the company for the next 2 years, taking time off, going to the UFC, and then coming back and being the guy again. So to me, that's my number 1 pay-per-view.
That's a hell of a list you got there. Two of those are in my top 5, and surprisingly, Halloween Havoc 97 is not one of them. Royal Rumble 2000 and WrestleMania 17 are definitely in my upper echelon of favorite pay-per-views. Sidebar, my dad played deck hockey back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I would go just hang out as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, and the woman that owned the building that they ran this hockey league out of would buy and record certain pay-per-views and like give me a copy of the tape to watch. And the two events that I was given were Royal Rumble 2000 and WrestleMania 17. So from an early age, those are the only shows I really had like definitive access to. So I would watch and watch and watch. And it was just, it's funny that those events are really highly regarded across the board. And it wasn't just me being nuts watching two events over and over again. It's just funny that they actually are two of the greatest events, arguably of all time. It'll be interesting to see what Josh Cross has. I have a feeling, though, that a pay-per-view from 2011 is going to be near the top of this list. So, Josh Cross, what is your top 5 pay-per-views of all time?
All right. So, starting with number 5 is going to be WrestleMania 10. It's a culmination of the Owen Hart and Bret Hart feud, which is probably the best opening match in pay-per-view history. The Michaels Razor Ramon IC ladder match was also probably the best ladder match in WWE history as well, outside of TLC, obviously. I also love the whole dynamics of how they got there with Bret, Yokozuna, and Lex Luger, with Lex Luger and Bret both being eliminated at the same time at the Royal Rumble. And then they had to do a coin flip to decide who was going to go first in Mania, because they wanted both of them to have 2 matches. Both Yokozuna, Bret Hart, and Lex Luger were supposed to have 2 matches in Mania to even it out, since Yokozuna would have to face both of them. I love that whole dynamic of it. It's probably one of the most underrated WrestleManias, because I think in my opinion, it's probably the 3rd best WrestleMania of all time, but it's never up there compared to like the WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania 19s, WrestleMania 28s, etc. Number 4 would have to be King of the Ring 1998 for me, which is the infamous Mankind Undertaker Hell in a Cell match right in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the Mellon Arena. I think that match speaks for itself. I loved the whole dynamics of just Undertaker just basically destroying Mankind. And there's definitely points over the match where you basically thought Mankind was dead. Number 3 is going to be WrestleMania 19. It's probably it's not the best WrestleMania, but it's probably the most stacked WrestleMania in terms of star power and future Hall of Famers. Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, that match was amazing, even though Brock botched the moonsault. You had Rock, Stone Cold 3. You had Hogan versus McMahon, which was like the culmination of like 20 years with both of them working in the business. And you also had Michaels Jericho, which in my opinion was the match of the night. Number 2 was going to be Money in the Bank 2011. It was the start of a whole new era, with CM Punk winning the WWE title, and also Daniel Bryan winning the Money in the Bank briefcase. It felt like a breath of fresh air after of John Cena being at the top of the business. And my number 1 pay-per-view of all time is obviously going to have to be WrestleMania 17. It was the end of the Attitude Era. It marked the end of WCW. And in my opinion, it was the America.
I think you cut out a little bit there at the end, Josh, but I did hear that WrestleMania 17 was at the top of your list. I'm interested that WrestleMania 10 made your list. And I've been saying for a while, instead of the 2 matches per each contender before the facing Yokozuna, I would have thought it would have been interesting had they tried a triple threat match between Bret, Yokozuna, and Luger, which would have been unprecedented for the time, as triple threat matches didn't really come into prominence in WWE until 1997. They had been done in ECW. They had been done in a non-traditional format in WCW before that. But I would have loved to have seen that. Yeah, Money in the Bank 2011. Yeah, you said it. I think it changed a lot. I agree with WrestleMania 17 being the end of the Attitude Era. A lot of great points there. And speaking of great points, we now go to a pre-debate topic, which is the Mount Rushmore discussion. Now, this is a discussion that when any wrestling fan gets asked it, it could be 4 guys this day, but you ask them tomorrow, it could be 4 other guys. You could ask them by next, after WrestleMania ends, it could be a different 4 guys. Mount Rushmore is such a divisive yet very opinionated and quite argued topic amongst wrestling fans. So I'm curious. We'll start with Josh. Let's hear your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling. Now, this will be 4 pro wrestlers, male or female. The quantifiers are anything you want them to be. But if you were making and constructing a Mount Rushmore in North Dakota, what would those faces look like? And they don't have to be faces or heels. They could be any.
So
Josh?
my list is going to encompass basically everything that makes a pro wrestler, including ring work, charisma, the amount of for their company, and star power, overall crossover to popular culture. Now, my number 1, probably by George Washington, is going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin by default. He was at the top. Wrestling was at its peak in the late 90s and early 2000s. The ratings at that time have never been replicated since. And the revenue time probably has not been replicated since as well. And I know if you want to throw in inflation, you can, but the main point at the time was Stone Cold was at the top when wrestling has never been popular. So therefore, he automatically gets into the Mount Rushmore. The second person for Mount Rushmore is going to have to be Hulk Hogan. He basically set the standard for what it is to be a superstar in wrestling throughout the 80s, and he did it for over a decade. Hogan is a household name. Everybody knows who he is. You could ask multiple people who have never watched wrestling who Hulk Hogan is, and they would know who he is, and they would definitely know who he was if he walked in the street randomly just because of how iconic his image is. Number 3 is going to be The Rock, mostly for his star power and his crossover appeal into popular culture. There hasn't been a movie star in the past 10 years like The Rock. Everybody knows who he is. He's involved in so many ventures, from sports now, the XFL, movies. I think he just released a rap song a few months ago, actually. And the body of his work in WWE speaks for himself with the amount of main events he has participated in. And number 4, I know this is going to be controversial, especially to Donnie, is going to be Ric Flair. Ric Flair was at the top of the business in Jim Crockett, WCW in the early 80s, before WrestleMania, Hulkamania, WWF. Vince McMahon even took off in the mid 80s. I know people like to say he was never at the top of the business in the best business, but the facts speak for themselves. That he was at the top of the business before WWF was a thing, or was a big thing, I should say. And Ric Flair has crossover appeal. I know he's been mentioned in numerous rap songs. I don't know which songs specifically. I'm not the biggest rap fan, but I've heard him be mentioned in numerous rap songs. And you can't really say that about Stone Cold, The Rock, or Hulk Hogan, or even John Cena. I know some people like to put Cena on the list, but my thing about Cena He was at the top of the game for for about a decade. However, the business was turning downhill. I don't know if you would want to necessarily blame Cena for it, but you can't reward him for basically the business going not necessarily under, but losing popularity. And I don't want to put The Undertaker in there as well. I know he's probably the most loyal WWE wrestler that the company has ever had. I'm sure he had numerous opportunities to leave WWE and go to WCW during the Monday Night Wars, but he never did. He was always a Vince McMahon guy, but he doesn't have that appeal, in my opinion.
Wow. A lot to unpack there. So to recap, Josh Cross, you have Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Ric Flair. Now, this is slightly different than mine, although this is not, the platform for me to do it. I believe I've done it before on this program, but I go with Hogan, Austin, Flair, and I do go with Cena purely because of what I am taking your point of why he's not there, and I'm making it why he should be there. The fact that he was on top of the WWE through the darkest of periods, like 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, those are very, very down years for WWE, and for Cena to still be on top, and it doesn't mean that okay, so because the business was terrible, the guy that's on top is terrible. He led them through the darkest times, and they still came out of it better than they were before once we got into 2012, 2013. I know CM Punk was a part of that as well, but you have to have a dance partner, and John Cena was that guy to bridge that gap, and he led the company through, again, some of the darker times. So that's where I kind of stand with John Cena, and that's why I put Cena there, is because he will be wrestling at WrestleMania, and The Rock will not be. So, Donnie, let's go to you. You've got a chisel, you've got a hammer, you got a big rock to be putting 4 faces on it. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling?
Okay, Juice. Like I said before with the top 5, I feel like this is also a very loaded question, so I'm going to head and ask you, would you agree with this, that you have the Mount Rushmore? The Mount Rushmore is usually like the guys that were the apex of the business across the board, but I feel like you also have a Mount Rushmore where you have to have like the best technical wrestlers in the world. Like, I feel like there is an in-ring Mount Rushmore, and then there is like an encompassing Mount Rushmore of everything that someone has done in the body of their career. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but for the sake of this argument, let's hear your all-encompassing for the sake of this argument. We can go to the other one another time.
To touch on what Josh said about Ric Flair, he's not in my Mount Rushmore. And that is to not take anything away from Ric Flair. He's a 16-time world champion. He's one of the greatest of all time. I just feel like to be on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, you have to be the guy in the biggest company in wrestling. And Ric Flair, I think, is a one-time WWE champion, and that's it. And all of his other title reigns happen in other companies. Not to take anything away, but you got to get it done in WWE to be on the Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. The Rock is also not on my Mount Rushmore just because, I always felt like he was 1B to Stone Cold's 1A, and I don't really like including 2 people from the same time period on Mount Rushmore, so I know that could be a little bit controversial, but number 1 for me is going to be Hulk Hogan. I feel like Hulk Hogan is the very first face of professional wrestling. I feel like he put professional wrestling on the map as far as pop culture and in media nowadays with how popular it was. Like, Hulk Hogan brought all of that in. He was the first guy to, put mainstream eyes on professional wrestling. Number 2 for me is going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin's probably the biggest draw in professional wrestling history. The numbers have never been higher as far as ratings and merchandise sales goes when Stone Cold was leading the charge. It wasn't for a very long time. Injuries obviously cut that a little bit short, but for the time period that he was in there, man, it was the biggest time period in professional wrestling. Number 3 for me is going to be John Cena. I feel like John Cena is the greatest performer of all time. He's the GOAT, in my opinion. Tied with Ric Flair for world championships, all in WWE, by the way. I hope he does break that record if we ever do get to see him break it. He deserves it. the number one Make-A-Wish granter of all time. You know, the work that he does for kids and all that is bar none. Nobody can match that. And I feel like the point that Josh made about it being a downturn in the business when Cena was on top could be contributed. You know, WWE was trying to change their product and, you know, gear towards kids. And I know some people that don't have kids and adults aren't really like in agreement with that. They want a little bit more of an edgier product, but it needed to be done in order for WWE to get to the places they are now. So I understand the business aspect of it. And my last guy on Mount Rushmore, you know, he's still carving his spot, but it's going to be Roman Reigns. I feel like he's had a title reign that's unmatched for our generation. I never thought I'd be sitting here in this day in wrestling and watching somebody who's almost had the title for 1,000 days. Like, I just never imagined that to be possible in this day and age. And it hasn't gotten stale. Like, you don't hear like the audibles are like, we want Roman to lose the title. If Roman loses the title at Mania, that's all good. But I feel like if he retains the title, you're not going to hear like this audible pushback. Like, I don't feel like anybody's getting sick of him being the champion just because of how good a performer he is. He's a main event in multiple WrestleManias already, and he still has so much more left in the tank. So I'm really excited to see what the future is going to hold for him because, in my opinion, as of right now, he's the best performer in professional wrestling today.
Wow. Profound words there. I really don't necessarily disagree with you with Roman. I will kind of just amend what you said there, where you're saying, you know, if Roman were to win, and it's funny because we're about to touch on this topic here for our first debate after I go over some of the rules and regulations to keep this thing civil. But if Roman were to win and retain at WrestleMania, you're probably right with the no pushback, but I think it would be almost I mean this in just a general sense, not in how big of a situation it is comparatively. Obviously, this other moment is more important. But when Brock defeated Taker at WrestleMania 30, the air got sucked out of that building, and it was just unexpected. And I think at this point, I mean, and it has not been stale, it really hasn't. But at some point, we've been going almost every single show that Roman's been defending it. Okay, well, if this guy doesn't win it, like who's gonna do it? You know, it was gonna be Drew. It could have been Brock again. Could have been The Rock. You know, and now we're here. It's gonna be Cody. But if it's not Cody, I think the fans would just be like stunned and shocked. So I think you're onto something there. The fact that it wouldn't necessarily be them being adverse to Roman being champion, but more or less like, well, who would stop this guy if Cody couldn't do it? Like what, you know, and that's where we'll try to get into the next topic. But, so Donnie, you had Hogan, Cena, Austin, and Roman as your Mount Rushmore. Josh Cross, Hogan, Rock, Austin, Flair. I love the disparity there, but it's interesting. Hogan and Austin on both of your guys' Mount Rushmores, and both those guys are on mine. So that tells you something, you know. Steve Austin, clearly, potentially the biggest star the business ever saw. At least he was on top when the business was at its peak in 1998. Although with Hogan, you could say that Hulk Hogan is the greatest babyface and simultaneously the greatest heel that ever lived, which is quite the statement to make, like him or not. I guess that is a face or a heel, like him or not. But I love that topic. I'm glad we got to discuss all those things. Now we're going to get to our main event here. This is the debate portion, although I've been kind of letting you guys just have the floor, giving some background on your guys' history as fans and what you guys are kind of into. That's what we kind of set this whole thing up with. But to close out today's portion with you guys, we're going to go over 3 topics. They're not going to be super long. They're not going to be super detailed, but they're very important in the scheme of things right now. I would wager. I'm going to go over the actual question, and I'm going to kind of set it up for you guys, and then I will go to one of you. I don't know which I'll start with. We'll get there, and you will have a minute and a half to give me your first thought on the topic, and then the other person can come back with their rebuttal. I will kind of chime in after that to see where we're at, and we'll go from there. We'll do 3 topics, and that's how we'll close this portion of this show with you guys. It's been great so far. Once again, this is the Juice Box. Hopefully you guys are still listening. First, tough debate topic for you guys. It's pretty simple. We got WrestleMania coming up this Saturday and this Sunday. But on Sunday, it's the big one. It's Roman Reigns, the Bloodline, the Samoan Dynasty, head of the table. You know, you got the lineage forever, the Wild Samoans, Rocky Johnson, The Rock, the Usos, Solo, Roman Reigns. Don't forget Yokozuna, as Josh Cross stated earlier. And I also misspoke. Mount Rushmore is actually, in fact, in South Dakota. So it's nice to have the editing during the show. It's nice to have that going. But the big question is Roman Reigns, head of the table. He's the champ. I mentioned it last segment. Is there someone to beat him? Because if this guy, Cody Rhodes, who has his own lineage with his father, Dusty Rhodes, his brother, Dustin Rhodes, with just an incredible amount of respect and duration of their lineage throughout the history of wrestling. I remember seeing Cody Rhodes as a child at Slamboree 95 when they inducted Dusty into the WCW Hall of Fame. Now we're seeing him here. He was Stardust, he was Cody Rhodes, he was masked Cody Rhodes, he was dashing. He went from that to being an indie star, killed it on the indie scene, helped create a true number 2, or, 1B, show with AEW, and that's still going 4 years strong. But he decided, you know what, I've built my stock up. I'm going back to WWE because I, clearly am in a better place now than I ever was before when I was in WWE. And without that Vince McMahon, rumored, without that Vince McMahon creative thing, maybe Cody's got a shot here. Roman versus Cody, WrestleMania 39. It's going to be Sunday night. Some people still believe that this is a 50-50 up in the air thing. Cody won't actually win after winning the Rumble and getting the Triple H and O2 injury return video package and all this stuff and all the hype. Some people still think that will not be enough to dethrone the head of the table after almost 3 full years of being champion, which, Donnie, to your credit, unprecedented in this era. Josh, you stated earlier about how your grandfather was talking about, or he lived through the 60s, 70s, and 80s of wrestling and seeing the history and all that. Bruno with a 7-year reign. Hogan with a 3 to 4 year reign from 84 to the beginning of 88. We did not have CM Punk, 434 days. Some of these things have not been seen since then, and now we got Roman with a 3-year reign almost. Will it end this Sunday at WrestleMania? I'm going to start off with you, Josh Cross. You have a minute and a half. No pressure. Who wins? Does Roman stay at the head of the table, or does Cody finally reach the mountain that his father couldn't?
As much as I would love for Roman Reigns to continue this reign, all the way to 1,000 days, 1,500 days, 2,000, whatever, Cody has to win. Coming back was for him to become the next guy, the next face of this company. You don't set Cody up like this with the Royal Rumble win just to have him lose to Roman Reigns. And if he doesn't win, who is going to be the one who finally beats Reigns, dethrones Reigns, whatever you want to call it? I don't know. It has to be Cody. If to be Cody, then he should have just had Sami Zayn win the Royal Rumble and have Sami do it. But if it's not Cody, else at this point.
Is that all you got, Josh? Is that you got a couple more? You got about 30 more seconds. Is that your big push for Cody? Cody being the guy?
It's basically that's what the plan was for over a year now. They have to stick with it. They commit to it at the Rumble. I don't think there's anything else that they could do. I think you'd be wasting Cody. You'd be wasting his rise to stardom if he doesn't win. This is his time. You have to give it to him.
All right. Josh Cross says Cody is the guy. Quote, it has to be Cody. Wow. So, Donnie, I'll go to you. You got a little over a minute and a half. You had Roman Reigns in your Mount Rushmore. Who wins? Does Cody dethrone? Does it have to be Cody, or does it have to be Roman forever? I'll let you go.
I'm going to divert from my previous point in the Mount Rushmore segment just because, like, I agree with Josh in the aspect of it probably does have to be Cody. I mean, the promos that he's cutting right now and the things that he's been doing since he's come back, he feels like the number one babyface that the company has been looking for a very long time. Like, he feels legitimate. When he's in the ring with Roman and, you know, they're going back and forth, it feels like very important. You feel the electricity between the two guys and you feel the chemistry. I can't wait for the match itself because I know it's going to be fantastic. They're going to tell a wonderful story. But you have to capitalize on the momentum that Cody has right now. I feel like if you don't pull the trigger right now, then what was this all for? You know, he's white hot going into this match. You've told the story. Now finish the story. Somebody has to end it. So I don't feel like you're at a point with anybody else as far as they've been built up the way Cody has to give them that opportunity. You could say, you know, if Roman wins, there's a handful of guys. My guy would probably be like the most legitimate opponent to him after Cody would be Bobby Lashley, just because they haven't really interacted too much since Roman's been the champion. You could have a dynamic with the Hurt Business, you know, MVP and Paul Heyman could do their back and forth. That's the only program I could really see Roman having if Cody doesn't win. But in my opinion, you need to have that kind of ending to WrestleMania too. And I feel like everybody's expecting it. The only concern that I have with Cody winning, and he kind of touched on it in his last promo he did, stop making this about Dusty Rhodes. Like, we know the story. We've heard it all. We get it. I don't want this title reign to be defined by Dusty Rhodes. I want Cody to organically grow and have his own moment, you know, because he's deserved this. I feel like he could be the face of the company and really carry it going forward if he is the guy to indeed beat Roman at Mania.
Poignant points there. Now, I will kind of go along with what you said there. I don't necessarily think it's gonna be about Dusty going forward. First off, Josh mentioned Sami Zayn. You know, he could have been the guy that did it. He should have been, you know, he should have won the Rumble, or he should have won at Chamber or something if this wasn't going to be Cody. You, Donnie, came up with Bobby Lashley as someone who we really haven't seen interact, you're right, with Roman in the Bloodline since its inception back in 2020. Now, your last point, though, with Dusty, I think this whole thing is with Cody. It's first of all, it's organic. It is real. I do like the Dusty dynamic. He, of course, won the NWA title, but never won the WWE title. And in fact, it was quite the rib that they put on Dusty. Polka dots and you know, just not taking it as seriously as maybe your traditional NWA fan would have liked. And you see that when Ric Flair came into WWE, he won the Royal Rumble and won the world title. So they kind of corrected that mistake. But Dusty had such a great time and really embraced that role. And, you know, same with Dustin. Dustin embraced the Goldust role. Cody, to his credit, embraced the Stardust role. He might not have wanted to be there and do that, but he embraced it. So now you see those parallels between all those guys. Obviously, they're all related. Now the story being, you know, Dusty never did it. I need to finish the story. I need to be the one to win the WWE title. It is kind of all about Dusty, but here's my thing. This is all just to get to this moment, because once he wins the title, you know, I'm sure you'll get a Roman rematch. But I think the goal, and this could be a whole nother discussion, but I think the end goal here is Cody's going to win the title, but at some point they are going to do what AEW should have, and that is turn this man into the biggest heel that the company has seen. Because you have Sami Zayn, hottest babyface going right now, that wasn't a Royal Rumble winner. He didn't do any of that. He was literally just a sidekick to Roman in the Bloodline, but turned out to be one of the hottest stars that they have right now. You have a face, Seth Rollins, coming up that he has a match coming up with Logan Paul, but he is on such a roll, and him and Cody had great matches last year, and now you flip the dynamic of heel and face. There's just so much more room for Cody as a heel, But to get to that point, he's got to win this title to dethrone Roman. And his merch, Cody's merch, and like action figure sales, his merch, live events, everything has been going and trending upward as the face for Cody. I mean, they're selling the weight belts at shows. Everything is trending upwards for Cody. So I think for Mania and a little bit after the fact, it will lead for Cody to be a face. But at some point, I do think you got to pull that trigger and have him go bad, have him go rogue, have him have an edge to him. And you got plenty of fresh faces, pun intended, to go against Cody. But I, you know, both of you guys had great points, I thought. And I don't know if one answer is better than the other, to be quite honest. It's more of a 60-40, I think, in this room, because we all said that Cody should be the guy, but we all kind of don't seem too sure that he will be. We really, you know, the last 3 years are any indication, it's conceivable that Roman just wins, and we just got to deal with it. You know, I thought it's not a huge, like, big take, but if Roman just was like, you know what, I'm relinquishing the title because no one's going to beat me, that wouldn't even surprise me. And I think that would be a wild pivot to go from, hey, no one's going to beat me, I want to do something else. Like, you know, that there's only so many ways to take a title off somebody outside of, you know, an injury or what have you. But hell of a first topic. I think we're all going to be tuned in for WrestleMania to see who really comes out on top. Who won't be coming out on top, though, is a guy who will probably never see a WWE ring again, although if they do the Hall of Fame ceremonies in the ring, like they have been after SmackDown, which is kind of a demotion in my view, then this man would be in a ring again. Maybe. We'll see. Will CM Punk, the very controversial CM Punk, ever come back to wrestling again? Not just AEW, not just WWE, not just under a mask at an indie show hitting a GTS. Who, what company would even want him back? The rumors and everything the last couple of days have been even more potent with CM Punk as more and more comes out about the all-out fracas that happened at the presser. Although I think we might get some All Access stuff on that AEW All Access show. It seems like they might cover some of it. So maybe it's all a work and we've all been part of this work. But I ask you first, Donnie, as maybe not the biggest CM Punk fan, but, you know, you supported him throughout the years. Will CM Punk ever come back to wrestling again in any capacity, which, you know, it could mean WWE backstage like he did, in any capacity, or is he just going to be ostracized and this is going to be it? You got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Let's hear it, Donnie.
I personally think he will come back. I think it's only a matter of time and finding the right spot for him, because they're kind of doing different programs in AEW with guys right now. In my opinion, over maybe like the last 6 months or so, AEW's been kind of on a downshift. Pretty much ever since this Brawl Out thing happened, it's kind of been moving downward. And with the last pay-per-view that they had, I feel like that was a shot in the arm that they needed, and I feel like their TV shows are starting to get better weekly. But they don't really like have anybody for MJF that feels like a legitimate challenger for him right now. And I feel like the story between him and CM Punk with their rivalry earlier, a year ago or so, tells itself. You could have a good program with those guys. You know what you're going to get. But I feel like the money program for them is definitely Omega and CM Punk. I feel like that could be one of the best programs in professional wrestling history as far as, you know, on the microphone and in the ring. I feel like they could put on an absolute classic between those two guys. That match needs to happen for AEW because they have – it just seems like they have no direction right now. They don't really know where they're going. They're doing this elite stuff. They're doing the stuff with the 4 pillars, and that's all good, but, like, there's no consistency with any of it. So, in my opinion, I feel like he will be back. If not an AEW ring, I feel like Hunter would at least entertain that phone call, because WWE always goes by the never say never thing. Like, we never thought we'd see Bruno back, and he came back. We never thought we'd see Warrior back, and he came back. And Hunter had a hand in all of that stuff. So I don't feel like he will put his ego above what he believes can draw money for WWE as far as CM Punk is concerned.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I really do think he could come back to AEW. Now, it does seem like there's a lot of fractured ties there. But, I mean, we all know wrestling is a bizarre form of entertainment, and it's an interesting business model. independent contractors, workers, whatever you want to call them, ego driven, a lot of attitudes, a lot of different egos, a lot of different opinions are all throughout these locker rooms, and it's really never not been that way. It's been that way for as long as the sport has really been a thing. But now we're at a point where everything is documented. Everybody knows everything about everybody, and it's tougher to kind of just go away and then like come back and everything just kind of be done and painted over, because with CM Punk, that's happened a few times now where, you know, he left, he came back, he left as a work and he came back, and then he got into AEW and it was really great for a good chunk of time. And then when you think that it was going to be the pinnacle for him, winning the world title in his hometown, it didn't seem like that was good enough. So there's so many different aspects and perspectives you can take on this. I just would personally like to see him come back to AEW and just, you know, work it all out with Omega and those guys, because there's literally so much money on the table if you had a CM Punk Kenny Omega match or feud, or hell, CM Punk and FTR versus the Elite. Everybody knows how much money and how important that would be if they could pull that off in a way that's smart. So that I said perspectives earlier. No bigger perspective than the man who had a CM Punk cardboard cutout standee in his college apartment, as long as I knew him, than Josh Cross. Josh, you got 2 or so minutes. CM Punk, will he ever come back? And if he does, what's going to happen? Is it even worth it? Let's hear it.
So I honestly changed my mind about this, like, almost every day as new news and updates come in regarding about the whole situation dating back to Double or Nothing all the way up into the Brawl Out in September. Honestly, right now, I don't think he comes back. I really don't. I think there's more powerful voices in the AEW locker room right now, such as Moxley and Jericho, who do not want any part of him. Jericho already called Punk a locker room cancer. Moxley definitely has a ear of Tony Khan. And it's going to come down to whether Tony Khan, as in the worst MJF, is a mark or not for CM Punk. After do you really want someone back there who disrespected half your locker room in a public forum like that? That goes against the whole ethos of the whole wrestling industry. He didn't just betray the trust of 1 or 2 or 3 people in the backstage locker room. He basically told the whole locker room to go screw themselves, essentially. Why would you want someone back who is like that? I know something might happen. Like I said, Tony is a big CM Punk fan, so it could happen, but like, I'm leading 60-40. CM Punk is not coming back to AEW. And I know there's always rumors of CM Punk back, but I don't really buy those rumors. When Punk left WWE in 2014, most of his anger was directed towards Triple H and how he maintained everything. I remember when Punk first left, it was Vince reaching out to him. It wasn't Triple H who's reaching out to Punk. It was Vince trying to mend those fences. Punk, according to reports, Punk had a better relationship with Vince than Punk had a relationship with Triple H. And I know Donnie brought up how Triple H helped mend numerous fences of the old timers, like Ultimate Warrior, Bruno Sammartino, Randy Savage, Bret Hart. But those broken fences, they weren't with Triple H. They were with Vince. This is really the first big, quote unquote, outside shoot feud that Triple H has had with another wrestler that we know of. So yeah, I don't think he comes back to AEW, and I don't think WWE, at least under the auspices of Triple H's rule, brings him back. Now, that being said, I will say best thing for the industry right now would be for CM Punk to come back to AEW, feud with the Elite, have a one-on-one match with Omega, and then have another match with champion MJF before MJF becomes a free agent in 2024. But I'm just not seeing it, honestly. I'm not. I think this is it for Punk. He might do some random indie shows, like you said. He might, who knows, he might go to Impact, even though he says he'll never work for Impact again in his life. And that was before he even went to WWE back in 2005. I think this is it. I think that's done. I think it's over for CM Punk.
Wow. You could not have ended that topic with a more poignant word there. I think it's over for CM Punk, coming from a man who worships the man. Wow. I'm in kind of agreement with both of you. Like you said, Josh, with Donnie's point, yeah, those fences were mended, but those were all Vince guys that had problems with Vince, and all seem to have like just a better experience overall with Triple H. Now, Warrior is an anomaly because Triple H and him had that match at Mania 12, so I think there was still some heat there, but I think Vince, you could throw Hogan involved with the discussions with Warrior coming back. I think Warrior just wanted to mend fences with everybody at that point of his life, and that's how that kind of happened. But with CM Punk, man, it's like, who really are his friends? It seems like people that are around him more now, it's like FTR or Danhausen, Brody King. There's only certain people that you even see CM Punk interact with or talk to outside of, the AEW, WWE circles. It just doesn't seem that like he's fully back in or would want to come back in. No one's been able to really discuss this. And that's the other problem with it, is that no one's really able to talk about it the way I think we'd like them to. As fans, we want to know everything. As I said, all fans have access to everything. But even with that, we don't really know what happened at Brawl Out. And to be fair, we probably won't ever know the full story, at least the full true story, unless there's some crazy security footage we're not privy to. I mean, Jericho has a side, Punk has a side, the Elite have a side, Ace Steel and Omega, like all these different players all have different perspectives, and I'm sure one would blame the other and vice versa, but somewhere in there is the truth, but I just don't know if we'll ever reach that truth. And it is unfortunate because, like we all said, I think we all agree, the money is in CM Punk coming back to AEW and just putting it behind us and moving forward. I mean, it's 2023. Why are we doing ego-driven decision making when there's so much money to be made? I mean, and I'm sure they all know it. That's the other thing. All these guys know that the money's there. It's just, are you willing to put your ego aside for that? And it seems like we're all not sure if CM Punk could. So, be that as it may, we might never see CM Punk in a wrestling ring again. But we got one more topic. This is a little bit more of just a fun topic. Fun in the sense of it's such in a weird way, the pandemic, as terrible as it was for the world, for a couple of reasons, wrestling has been better off due to that world event. And what I'm getting at is, well, the one point we'll be talking about, but even so, with Roman Reigns, people kind of forget that the match that Roman was supposed to have at Mania 36 was against Goldberg, right? And the pandemic sent all of that into a frenzy, and we ended up not getting that at all. And in fact, we had an almost entirely different type of card. But without that happening, we may never get the Roman Reigns heel turn. We might not ever get the Bloodline. We might not ever get to see these companies kind of throw out whatever because there are no live fans to really hate or love something. So they really had the freedom to test it out, to give it a shot. And I think wrestling is a little bit better off like that. But the other point is, once the pandemic did happen and they decided, hey, WrestleMania just can't happen in a stadium, a true stadium setting with fans, they decided, you know what? It's been so long. We've had Manias for at such a long duration. Let's just try this 2-night model. And Josh Cross, I mean, you and I both, we tailgated at WrestleMania 35. That was the last Mania I was at. And we were there. We tailgated all day. We went into the show. Show started at 7. The main event for WrestleMania 35 did not begin until after midnight Eastern Standard Time, and everybody had the same feeling. It was just a long, drawn-out night. And if you go to any other shows that weekend, and that's the end of it, is a 6+ hour live show where you're going to sit for some of it, but you want to stand up. It's WrestleMania. It's the Super Bowl of wrestling. And it's just too much. So when WrestleMania 36 had to be shrunken down into a performance center, and they realized, you know what, Wrestle Kingdom and some of these other big shows internationally have done 2 nights of shows. Let's try this model out. And they did 2 nights, which again, for that pandemic where everybody was just kind of sitting around at home and no one was having fun with anything, wrestling really helped everybody out by here's 2 days of WrestleMania, 2 days of solid matches. We got the Boneyard match. We got the incredible Firefly Funhouse match. There was just more room to do and experiment, different things with the 2 nights. And 37, 38, and now 39, they've now experimented and they tried the 2-night model with fans, and it worked in Tampa, where Josh Cross, you were in attendance. 38 last year in Dallas, and now again in LA, they're doing the 2-night model. I personally love it because you get, again, 2 nights of WrestleMania. How could you go wrong? You get more people potentially on the cards. You get 3.5 to 4 hour shows. You get a lot of different avenues with 2 nights. You can experiment each night. Each night has a different feel. You have a different opener and a different closer. But I ask you guys, what are your preferences? Would you prefer a 1 night only, one WrestleMania night where it's 4, 5, 5.5, 6 hours straight, where you get, your intro matches, some medium matches, maybe some people get left off the card, maybe some things run too long or too short, and, one solid main event? Or do you prefer 2 nights? You get an opener on each night, you get a closer on each night, and you get a full experience 2 straight nights of WrestleMania. I am going to talk to you, Donnie, first, as someone who has been to quite a few shows over the years, but you sat and watched WrestleMania for how many more? Do you prefer 1 night or do you prefer 2 nights? And then what do you like to see going forward? Do you want to see them continue with 2 or go back? Take as long as you need.
I'm going to start this off by saying I'm extremely jealous of the fact that you guys have been to multiple WrestleManias, because I haven't made it to my first one yet. I'm hoping maybe next year in Philadelphia will be the first one for me. I'll get to experience with you guys. That would be ideal, obviously. But to me, I see the pros and cons between both. Like, I see the benefits and the non-benefits between 1 night and 2 night. Me personally, I would prefer it to be 1 night only and maybe like a 5-hour event, just because you have so much other stuff getting packed into that week. Like, you have NXT on Wednesday, then you have SmackDown on Friday. Now they're doing the Hall of Fame after SmackDown, which I don't really like the presentation of it. I feel like the in-ring Hall of Fame induction's kind of like you said earlier, the motion. It just feels less important to me. I wish that they would go back to having it on the stage, like the Saturday before NXT does their takeover or their premium live event, I guess they're calling it now, because takeovers are gone. And then, like, with the 2-night event, you also have the NXT show, and you want to put that on before you go into a 4-hour WrestleMania card. So that's like 8 hours total the first day before you even get to the second day. By the time I get to the second day, I'm kind of like burned out. You're like halfway through the second day of the show, and you're like, man, I've watched 30 hours of wrestling this week. I think I'm good. But another thing about that is I understand them trying to get as much talent as they possibly can on a WrestleMania card because it is their biggest show of the year. But my argument with that is I just seen a report come out maybe a few days ago saying talent's upset because they're left off the WrestleMania card or the WrestleMania card isn't big enough. Hunter wants to condense the card. And it's like, you have nobody to be upset with but yourself. WrestleMania is not a participation award. Like, it's not everybody gets to go to WrestleMania. You have to earn that spot. It's the biggest show of the year. You got to bust your ass and get on the card. It's not just, oh, well, you work for us, so here's your WrestleMania spot. Like, back in the day in the Attitude Era, that would never fly. Either you got on the card or you didn't based off of your performance. So I don't understand now why we're just handing out WrestleMania spots just because it's something to do. So there's a lot of money to be made in it being 2 days. I just feel like it's extremely long-winded. It causes a little bit of fatigue toward the end just based off of everything you have going on in the week. And then you also have the Raw after Mania, which has kind of felt less important with the 2-night Manias. I wish that they would go back to making that feel like more of a spectacle as it was when you had it for one night. But like I said, I see everything for what it is. I understand both sides of it. For me, I would just prefer one night.
And I can kind of agree with you there. I see where you're coming from, and specifically, we'll get into this, Josh. Of course, we talked about WrestleMania 33, the first one you went to. That weekend, we went to Ring of Honor in Lakeland, Florida. We went to Joey Janela's Spring Break, the WrestleMania and the Raw after. I mean, if you go to those shows, you're packing in so much. And yeah, I do agree. Especially if you're there in person. And again, hopefully, Donnie, we do get to see you out there in Philly next year. The duration, it's a marathon of a weekend if you go. If you're sitting at home, I think it's a little easier to digest. And that's why I do think the 2 nights is a little bit better because you get that, you have a full night's sleep of intermission, which I could not be more happy about. And of course, Saturday night pay-per-views have always been, special. And now that they are more prominent and seeming to be the way to go going forward, more so with WWE because AEW still runs Sunday shows on 3-day weekends, but WWE seems to be doing all Saturday shows going forward, other than WrestleMania, of course. Josh Cross, you've been to 4 WrestleManias, as have I. You got to experience a 2-night Mania, though. Tell me how that was. I don't know. Tell me if you even went to both nights. I really don't know. In this whole answer, you got a couple minutes. Take your time. 1 or 2 nights, if you're there. And if you are going to watch it at home, what would you prefer? Let's hear it.
So after experiencing both 1-night Manias and one night of a 2-night Mania, I went to the Saturday one of WrestleMania 37 in Tampa. I prefer the 2-night Manias. The reason why that is because after experiencing for WrestleMania 33, Joey Janela, Ring of Honor, SmackDown, back to back to back to back to back, felt utterly exhausted from the whole experience, especially for Mania, because even though it wasn't like the WrestleMania 35 6-hour Mania, that Mania was still like 4.5 to 5 hours long, and I did feel totally exhausted by then. With the 2-night Mania, you can split up the card 3 hours on Saturday night, 3 hours on Sunday night. That's all you need for WrestleMania, in my opinion, at least. And these matches, they're supposed to tell, in my opinion, an extended story of what's going on. It's a culmination of a lot of feuds going on. So you can...
A little bit of a technical snafu here on the Juice Box, never a dull moment. But we were coming to a conclusion of the discussion of, would you prefer a 1 night of WrestleMania or 2 nights? We know that the current model is 2 nights after being 1 night for so many years. And now with that, after the pandemic, we're at a 2-night Mania, which I prefer, as a home watcher. I have not gotten to experience it as a 2-night watcher in person. But Josh Cross has, and let's hear again, if we didn't already have that in the previous recording, how you would prefer 1 or 2 nights, and then how you would schedule WrestleMania week going forward, Hall of Fame and everything included. Josh?
Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties on my end.
That's okay. This whole show has been a technical difficulty. So let's hear it, Josh. How would you plan your WrestleMania week?
So I would rather prefer 2 nights of WrestleMania compared to 1. You can pack more story into a 2-night Mania, in my opinion. But I know there's always that con of putting too many people on the card who don't deserve it. Well, in my opinion, WrestleMania is supposed to be the culmination of a year's worth or a month's worth of feuds. You can have 10, 20, 25-minute matches at WrestleMania. You don't have to stuff it with one night of like 10 matches, the next night another 10 matches. You're good for maybe 6 or 7 matches over a 3-hour period on night 1, and then you can do the same thing for night 2 with 6 or 7 matches over a 3-hour period. Our attention spans nowadays, they can't really entertain a 6-hour Mania like WrestleMania 35 was. That WrestleMania 35 that me and Juice went through, at the end, it was brutal. I don't know how I was still awake for it. I'm an old man. I go to bed early, so I was very surprised I was up past midnight. Granted, I'm not taking anything away from Becky, Charlotte, or Ronda. They put on a great match, albeit the finish was definitely botched. But just getting there and watching it was just brutal. I was just waiting for it to get over. Not because the match was bad, because I was just exhausted. That being said, this is how I would schedule WrestleMania, because the 2-night Mania is here to stay, and I know there's some people who want to have certain things during the week, and other people who don't. For example, like the Hall of Fame ceremony or NXT, their NXT's whatever they're calling Takeover now, Stand and Deliver or whatnot. What I would do is I would do NXT Tuesday, the weekly NXT show, nothing on Wednesday. Thursday, the Hall of Fame ceremony. Friday, SmackDown. Saturday afternoon, Stand and Deliver. Saturday evening, Mania Night 1. Sunday evening, Mania Night 2. And then Monday, Raw after Mania. And if you want, you can also do NXT after Mania on Tuesday. But after experiencing a live SmackDown on Tuesday after 33, I don't think there will be many people staying for that, because I was physically exhausted after WrestleMania 33. For the SmackDown after WrestleMania 33. But yeah, that's how I would do it. I understand why people still want a one-night Mania, just because it's tradition. That's how it was for 35 years. But I think it's time to innovate. I think it's time to recognize people's attention spans aren't as long as they're used to. And I think that's one of the things that really has gone right post-pandemic.
And I tend to agree with you. The Mania 33 I thought was a marathon, and that was just because we went to 5 different shows in 5 days. But WrestleMania 35 was such a long day. Just one day of it was taxing, to say the least. The weather was beautiful, like 65-degree weather, but you're standing outside, you're getting cooked by the sun, even if it wasn't really out, sunburn, and you're just winded, and MetLife drinks are like $25 a pop, and it was just a long, long night. But hey, WrestleMania is well worth it. I think we're all in agreement with that. These 2-night Manias, I think, are here to stay, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they kind of innovate and build off that. And if they ever will go back to a one night of Mania, it's hard for me to think that, considering they can sell 2 sets of tickets for WrestleMania, and WWE loves money. Why not? And I think that's the move that they will continue to make. Wow. So we have covered quite the litany of topics today here on the Juice Box. We went through some Mount Rushmore talk, some pay-per-views, and some favorite wrestler discussion. We finally got to decide if CM Punk's going to come back to wrestling, and we still really don't know. We're kind of in agreement that Cody is the guy to win, but we're all not really sure if he will win at WrestleMania. And some of us like one night of Mania, some of us like 2 nights of Mania. But Donnie, I think if you get to go to WrestleMania next year, you will probably prefer the 2-night option purely as a health concern for the long-winded WrestleMania day that it always is, and the weekend that surely is a party for everybody involved. But man, I have had quite the fun time discussing wrestling with you guys today. I always love talking wrestling. I do it all the time by myself, but this is why I really kind of wanted to get this show on the road, is to have some guys to just bounce off of, especially guys that know what they're talking about, and you guys definitely know what you're talking about in regards to the world of professional wrestling. And, as we all know, as everybody knows, this is the most exciting time to be a wrestling fan. I mean, it does not get any better than having WrestleMania, WrestleMania weekend. You get, again, it's a positive for me. You get 2 nights of arguably our favorite night of the year, with the thing that we love the most. And, it's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege. It's been an honor to talk to both of you guys today. I will let you guys have a little bit of a floor here, closing remarks, before we, get this thing, closed. Donnie, start with you. Good to have you on this show. Any closing remarks to today and your debate partner, Josh Cross?
First off, I just want to say again, thank you, Juice, for having us on. It has been a pleasure. It's been a blast. It's always nice to sit down with you guys and talk about wrestling. Really looking forward to WrestleMania next week. I'm probably more excited for this card than I have been for the last few years, just because there's been a lot of long-term storytelling this year with WrestleMania, and I feel like we haven't gotten that from WWE in quite some time. So really looking forward to it. Hope you have us on the podcast again. Very enjoyable. Had a great time. Appreciate everything. Maybe next time me and Josh can get into a little bit more of a heated debate, because, there are a lot of things that he says that I don't typically agree with. But nonetheless, I put up with him anyway. But that's all I got. Thank everybody for listening. Check out the previous episodes. Look forward to new episodes. Juice knows what he's talking about. Been a great time.
Appreciate the kind words, Donnie. And the topics today, I wanted to get you guys in here because you guys debate. And to be fair, it wasn't as much as a debate as it was a healthy discussion. And I really did, as much as I love you guys screaming at each other, I kind of enjoyed hearing you guys go in depth with a lot of these topics. I could sit here and listen to you guys do it all day, because I know I talk a little bit much for my own well-being, among other people. But again, thank you, Donnie, for being on the show. Josh Cross, man, we got WrestleMania coming up on Saturday and Sunday. I assume you're not going to be there, but you'll be watching. Thank you for being on the show today, and any closing comments for the show, today's discussion, and Donnie.
I just want to say thank you, Juice, for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure. I enjoy talking to both of you guys about wrestling. I'm very passionate about it. Hopefully, maybe if all the Juice Head fans want me back on, I'll be back on, but we'll see what happens in the future. I will not be attending WrestleMania this year. I'll be watching it in my apartment. I do plan on going to at least one night in Philly next year. Probably hopefully Saturday night in Philly, but we'll see what happens in the future since that's a year away. I do want to say, I'm piggybacking off one of our previous topics. I know you said people are like 55-45, 60-40 on whether Cody wins. Personally, I'm like 95%. I'm like 95% sure Cody's going to win. There's hardly any doubt in my mind Cody's going to win on next Sunday. And also, going back off the 2-night Mania debate, you can even you can even see in like going back to rewatch WrestleMania 35, Michael Cole during the main event with Charlotte, Becky, and Ronda, he was utterly exhausted. He had no voice, and that's not something you want to have in your announcer during WrestleMania. I that's like the first thing I notice whenever I rewatch that match. So that's just my little opinions on things. But thanks for having us, everyone. Keep listen to the past episodes. Juice definitely knows what he's talking about, and I will hopefully talk to you guys again soon.
Appreciate the kind comments and words, and I'm glad you kind of shoehorned in some more opinions at the end there, because you brought up the Michael Cole of it all. If you recall, and this is not some dirt sheet thing or any sort of insider information. This is just what happened. We have no reason to make something like this up. Josh and I were in the hotel with a couple of our friends after Mania 35, and I don't know what hotel. I don't know why we were there. I couldn't tell you why, but we looked over at the bar in the lounge area of the hotel, and who did we see? Not dejected, but just the most exhausted person on the face of the earth. And it was Michael Cole, just, throwing a drink back. I'm sure he was relaxed sitting there after the hellacious 6+ hours of calling an excruciatingly long WrestleMania and, having Vince in his ear for that long as well, screaming into it. Just looking so exhausted. And when we saw that, we really put things into perspective of like, we're talking about, 2 nights of Mania. Oh, it's nice to relax, or one night's too long. And imagine for the guys that not only have to be there, but not just the wrestler working for 30 minutes. Imagine the commentators that have to be behind the desk for hours on end, just going over stuff, talking about every point, getting screamed at by whoever in the production trucks, and still dealing with it for all our benefit. Michael Cole is a legend, and we thank him for his service. Both as a war correspondent and WrestleMania commentator. But be that as it may, long story long, this has been a fun show today. I'm so glad we got to talk about wrestling and WrestleMania and everything surrounding the world of pro wrestling. You guys will definitely be welcome on this show anytime, and I'll be looking forward to those episodes going forward. I'm sure we have plenty of different topics we can discuss, long form, short form, opinions, debates, whatever. And it'll be a fun time, I can guarantee that. But this has been a really fun time, real fun experiment. Thanks again to Donnie and to Josh Cross. I am Juice Springsteen. This has been The Juice Box, and we'll see you guys next week. That was The Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to The Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.